Making friends as an adult is hard enough as it is, it seems like, but a lot of people are really surprised when they move to France at how difficult it can be to make friends here, especially French friends. And as somebody who's lived here 3 times now, once in Nice, twice in Paris, for about a decade of my life in total at this point, to the point that I've gotten French citizenship, and as somebody who does have French friends, believe it or not, I thought I would share my experience in the process of making French friends. We'll probably end up talking a little bit about friendship as adults. It's not an easy thing to do anymore, it would seem. Maybe it never was. I don't know. I've only been an adult once so far. Yeah, I know for a lot of people it's really challenging. So if you're thinking of moving to France, be forewarned, it can be really challenging, but I also should make that disclaimer that the majority of my experience has been life in Paris. So a lot of this is going to end up being fairly Parisian influenced. I do have some experience outside of Paris, but yeah, everything's going to be colored by the capital city, which is actually a really good place to start, which is that Paris in particular gets a really bad rap. But I think that universally making friends in cities is actually very challenging. Whether you're in New York, London, Paris, there is an element, universally, it would seem, that people are just really busy. And the more people you cram into a space, the less likely they are to pay attention to anyone around them. And I think this is actually just for survival's sake as much as anything. Do you want to come up here? If you want a friend, you just, get a dog, I guess. Come on. Come on. He needs a lot of encouragement when it comes to jumping up in laps. I don't know why. It's clearly what he wants more than anything. Hey, you're going to block the microphone. Can you sit, please? Thank you. By and large, I think this also ties into when people think that of the French, especially Parisians, as rude, much like you might think of New Yorkers as rude. Honestly, whenever I go to London now, I think they're the most polite people in the world. So there is something to be said there. There is a difference between cities and cultures, but people are busy. They have lives. They have places to go. They may not have holes in their lives that they're feeling as acutely as somebody who's new to a place does. So that's something to keep in mind when you're going anywhere new, whether it's a city, a small town, wherever, you're stepping into a world that already existed before you got there. And it's really important to understand that world as best you can, which is good that you're sitting down and watching this video, because that would indicate you're giving that a try. Hopefully you've seen my other video on why you'll never be French or why you might struggle living here, which I will link to, of course, because those are kind of dives into what to expect when moving here more broadly. But when it comes to making friends in particular, one of the things that I've learned in a variety of places I've lived around the world is that it's on you to show up and to put the effort in and to demonstrate that you have something of value to bring. Generally speaking, I think the average person isn't fully aware or looking necessarily actively for friends in their daily life, especially if they're established, they've been there for a long time. And this is something you'll see between long-termers and short-termers in a lot of scenarios. Like if people are here to live, they might be less open to meeting and befriending tourists or people that are here for a short-term stay because they know they're going to be gone soon and they would like to invest in friendships that are going to last for a long time. Similarly, with French people, when you move into a new place, whether that's Paris or anywhere, I would imagine that it can be similar. They might be interested to get to know you a little bit. They might be curious, especially when you get outside the city. My experience in being in smaller towns and smaller cities around France has always been that people are much more interested in me as an American who speaks French than they are in Paris. There are a million Americans in Paris and nobody cares. You're nothing special. But you get outside and into the rest of France and there's a likelihood that there's a little bit more novelty to that experience and people are very interested to hear about you and why you're here. They might even be like, why? Well, less now than they used to, probably, but they might be like, why are you here? Why wouldn't you want to be in America? Because so many of them for so long dreamed of moving to America. It can also be kind of confusing, but intriguing to ask you, well, what is it that you see about France that interests you enough to want to be here, which you'll see in the comments on these videos I've been making too. A lot of the French people watch because they're very curious as to like, why would I be here in the first place? And to see what my perspective is and probably to test me and see like, do I really understand France and French culture as I apparently am claiming to do in these videos. Speaking of French culture and friendship, what I have noticed, I think it's really important to go back to something I said earlier, and I actually credited the wrong source on the quote. There's a paper that does a really good deep dive into this, but I found a Wikipedia article that had, I felt like a better summation of what a low trust society is, but it's a low trust society, ultimately family first, oriented in small groups, small communities. It's very inward focused in that sense because they don't trust outsiders, at least not quickly. And France is very much a low trust society. They have their family units and then they make friends at kind of 3 stages. This is obviously a generalization, but what I've found to be the case is that the French are open to making new friends when they get into school as kids, when they go to university, if they go to university, and then when they enter the workforce. So when they're at their job, they end up making new friends, but a lot of times those circles won't overlap. A lot of my French friends over the years, they have their multiple circles of friends, and sometimes as the foreigner, because there's something maybe fun about bringing the American guy to a party, I'll end up crossing over different circles for like an individual French friend. And that's how I came to realize they don't really cross those circles. Like I would meet different groups and I would very rarely see them at the same event. For birthdays occasionally and definitely at weddings. But otherwise, they kind of kept their lives separate, like their family life from their friend circle that they went to university with to their friend group that they had at work. I kind of saw a pattern in that where they had a bit of a Venn diagram going, but the only time it would overlap was for major life events. This makes it really hard to make French friends as an outsider because unless you're going to school, like if you go to university here, or you get a job here in France, you're gonna have a harder time meeting people because the French don't mingle in the same way that Anglophone culture does. This is something that I'll talk about when we talk about dating. I keep saying we'll talk about it. People keep commenting about it. And I've actually written out what I'm going to say about it, so we'll get to that. But that lack of mingling makes it very hard to meet new people across the spectrum. So don't be surprised if it's really hard initially to meet people. It's not impossible. I find French people to be very open and very welcoming, very curious, lovely human beings. I wouldn't live here if I found the French to be insufferable. I have my problems with French culture and individual French people, but overall, I love living here. I love the lifestyle, and I have a lot of French friends that I love. But I've also seen the evolution of friendship over time. I'm almost 40 years old. I've gone through a lot of seasons of friendship with a lot of different people in different countries. So I've kind of seen a lot happen, and I've been going through a series of evolutions recently, again, myself. So this is actually something I'm just kind of interested in as a whole, is how do we relate to each other, and how do we make the most out of the friendships we have? So when it comes to making French friends, this is what I would say. If you're moving here, especially if you're brand new, there are a few tips that I generally give everybody. I find myself needing to give these to younger people in their 20s more than older people, because the older you get, I think the more that this feels like common sense. But when I first moved here, I was like, I'm gonna make French friends, I'm only gonna speak French, like I'm not gonna hang out with any English speakers. And that kind of worked out for me. When I was an English assistant, teaching English in a high school in Nice, I didn't realize how helpful certain elements of this were. So the first, and I think the most important, is don't undervalue other expat or immigrant friendships. They don't have to come from the place you come from. They can come from a variety of different places. It can be very international. But the average French person who lives here cannot relate to what you're going through as an immigrant. When you move into France, a French person has never had to get their titre séjour. They've never had to go through the process of going to the prefecture and sweating it when sitting across from somebody with the stamp of life or death in their hands, right? They've definitely dealt with French bureaucracy, so they can relate to that. But they won't really be able to relate to a lot of the process of getting processed into French society. So having people that are going through that process with you or who have just gone through it can be really helpful for the sense of morale. Like if you don't have people with you, reminding you it's gonna be okay, you have your visa, you have the right to be here, just show up, make sure you bring everything you can, bring everything that they've told you to bring, and then bring some extra stuff because they're probably gonna ask for something that they didn't tell you about in advance. But don't tell them that you brought that extra stuff until they ask for it, so that you can be like, oh, I did bring that. Like there's a whole song and dance you go through that might seem natural to the average French person, and they may not be thinking about it when you're foreign and you're coming through this for the first time is very clearly different and very stressful. And it's really helpful to have people that can walk you through that. Even if nobody can directly help you, that emotional support is massive. Same with just emotional relationships. The ability to sit down and speak in your native tongue, to express what you're going through, and to have people who can console you in that is not to be underrated. It's not to say you shouldn't try to make French friends, and you are going to have to make a really strong effort to go out and make them. I would advocate that you need to bring as much as you can to the table as possible. You need to do everything you can to learn about French society, how to fit in, how to speak the language. That's the next point I had on here. Speaking the language helps immensely for a number of reasons. But I think this is generally true of making friendships as an adult, but especially in my experience here, you want to recognize that you have to bring something first. You really need to bring something to the table. If you show up as a bundle of need, you're not offering anyone anything, you're just looking to take, it's not how healthy friendships start in general. and you can't blame anyone if they're not really into that. But speaking French does help a lot, both because obviously a lot of people don't speak English, and you're in France, so expecting them to speak English isn't really fair. It's nice to have language exchanges. It's important for relationships to be able to speak in multiple languages. Fair enough. When we get to the dating side, I know for me, English is really important as far as dating goes, but I also speak French fluently. But when you're starting out and you want to make French friends and you want to improve your French, you want to integrate into society, then making the effort to speak French really matters. And as you make improvements, one of the things that I've found is going to parties where I'm the only English speaker or I'm the only American, it really can open the room to you to be an American who speaks French, because that seems very novel to the average French person. It's even more novel when you get out into the world beyond Paris. I remember when I've done vendange, the grape harvest, and I ended up having the same conversation a lot with basically everybody there, but nobody really spoke English. Everybody that was harvesting grapes with me, local French people, and they were so fascinated to know, like, why are you here? What's going on? And it was one of those little windows into like, oh, if I were to live here, I have a feeling that I'd be able to open up some interesting doors and conversations just by speaking French and not being French. That novelty is really important. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in the evolution of friendship. But the last thing is something that I've already said in multiple ways, but that is just put in consistent effort. My experience in moving to Nice and then moving to Paris and moving back to Paris has been every time I've landed here, it's taken 6 months to get up and running. Like, you need to have some emotional capital ready, a good 6 months of like, I can just give. Obviously you want to end up in a relationship where you're giving and taking, like it needs to be a two-way street. But when you're showing up in somebody else's world and you're asking for friendship, I think the best and the healthiest way to do that is by offering friendship, by offering whatever it is that you have and doing that consistently until you get a sense of whether or not this person even wants to be friends, if they're capable of that. And that's a longer road. So being able to have that 6 months of showing up and just planting seeds and watering them and seeing what grows and not expecting anything in return, like really not expecting that all those seeds sprout. I think it's healthy to expect something to sprout, and you absolutely should only go after the things that grow naturally and feel healthy. And that's an argument for therapy right there. If you're not, I was not aware of what a healthy relationship, what good friendships, healthy friendships looked like when I moved here, which is why I found myself in trouble in a number of different ways, because I ended up hanging out with the wrong people more than once. But you got to show up with your watering can with a little bit of manure and a trowel to get started. We're going to keep the gardening thing going. The other thing that I was going to say is that there needs to be room for growth, and friendships evolve, people change, especially if you're in an immigrant or expat community. People are always coming and going, so there's always turnover. So obviously you want to find the few people that you have that are going to be there for the same amount of time as you. With French friends, again, it's going to take a long time to be ingratiated and to be considered one of the tribe. And once you are, you really will be one of that tribe, as long as that tribe holds together. I have a French tribe that fell apart about a decade ago. Unfortunately, after I really felt like I was a part of it, shortly after that, the band literally broke up. There was a band at the center of it, and just like everybody just kind of drifted apart. But what I learned through that experience as well was that a lot of my early relationship with that group was based on things like the novelty of language exchange and asking questions about culture and language. All these things that are very wonderful and very enriching. But with a number of those friends, it came a point where I was like, oh, we don't really have anything in common beyond our lack of commonality. And once we've run out of curiosities, we kind of ran out of conversation. But then other people in the group, we had a lot in common, and we still had a lot to talk about, and we could sit down and do a variety of different things together that I found to be also very enriching, and there was a depth to that could carry on. So friendships often fit different needs at different times, and they don't have to all look the same. They don't have to be the same depths. This enters into realms of disappointment in relationships, expectations that we set on people that aren't fair. There's a lot to learn here, and I think that's just a lot of growing up, regardless of where you do that in the world. It's just part of being human. But it's okay to let things go, or to let things be what they are. And ultimately, I feel like where I've come with my friendships, my closest relationships are all international. They're all people that have lived here for a long time. Some of them were born here, some of them weren't. All of them have lived abroad. All of them speak French and English. There's a shared commonality in our experience that makes it possible for us to go and remain deeper in our relationship that wouldn't be possible with people that hadn't had similar experiences. I think that's just going to be the case, that you're going to find no matter where you are in the world. And that's not anything against French people. I also think I would struggle if I moved back to the States to really relate to people who had never left the US or their hometown. Or there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with them. And there's nothing wrong with me. It's just that as we have different experiences, it shapes us and shapes what we need to relate. And so that's why I said, like with dating as well, like I've come to realize, like, no, English is really important. I have dated French women who didn't speak much, if any, English. And there comes a wall there where it's like there are parts of my life and parts of my world that I want to share that I'm not able to. For some people, that's not a problem. For some people, they're very happy maintaining different worlds with different languages. And I've seen some very successful relationships do that. But that's why it's important to take the time to really reflect on what it is that you want. What is it that you need from a relationship? And then to be really clear about that, at least with yourself, so you can set healthy expectations within your relationships. And open expectations, like talk about it with your friends and say, like, what is it that we're really looking for here as friends? How can I show up to be a good friend for you? And what do I need for you to be a good friend to me? That is a whole other journey altogether, of course. But that brings me to something, I wrote this. I'm going to read something that I wrote because I think I probably wrote it better than I'll say it if I don't read it. The point isn't to make French friends. The long-term goal is to make good friends. Don't fight a good thing simply because it isn't French, and don't force a French thing if it isn't good. I love my life here. I'm grateful. I have so many French friends across quite the spectrum of backgrounds and interests. I have a lot of international friends, obviously. And like I said, basically all my closest friends are international. But if you're going to take anything away from this, I think maybe it's that good friendships start with us. The healthier we can be, and the more we can show up as our best selves, the healthier and better our friendships and relationships are going to be as a result, naturally. So focusing inward in that sense, I think, is an important first step. As far as coming to a place like Paris or the rest of France and making French friends, it is very doable. Like I said, the French are lovely. There are just probably some barriers to be aware of. Hopefully this video has helped you to feel a little bit more aware coming into your life in France. I highly recommend you make as many French friends as you possibly can. I know that they've enriched my life deeply, and my experience living in this country has enriched me so much, and I'm so grateful for it. Thanks to today's patron producer, WakeboardBot, most random and funniest name of the week for sure, and to all my patrons for supporting me through this entire journey of integrating myself into France. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe. If you'd like to support my channel directly, Patreon is the best way to do it, but obviously just watching these videos is a huge support on its own. Thank you for being here. And if you're interested in my take on dating French, that's coming real soon. I've already written out my thoughts. It's probably a touchy subject given the landscape of loneliness we have globally right now, but I'm gonna try to do my best on that one. So please be gentle, be gracious with me, and I'll see you bright and early one of these mornings sometime soon, probably for that and a few other things that are coming out the pipe here really soon.